Hey everyone, it's Kit Kat. So it's Sunday. I'm bored. I actually um, am doing this video because some people actually have asked me why I love sign language so much, and it's basically the history. And in this video, it's going to be, did you know? Um, and I think it's awesome. You get to see my knowledge of the history of sign language, which I absolutely love. Well, if you really want to know about me, follow, like, subscribe, follow, do all of that dumb stuff. Believe me, I love it. But bound to bound by popular belief, people think that America was the one who actually discovered sign language. That is not true. This is where my nerdiness and my history buff knowledge comes into play because I Google everything. And ever since high school, I mean, it's been 20 years since I went to high school, but I still know the knowledge of sign language. Um, I didn't know. Um, did you know that the first person that was recorded as deaf was actually um, introduced in 44 BC? I did not know that. I had no idea. His name was Quintus Pietus. Don't look at me like that. That is actually his name. Um, look it up. I had to look it up. I googled it. Actually he was a Roman general. Um, 44 BC was a long ass time ago, before Christ. And everything. He was actually. It's reported that Quintus Pietus, um, mainly because nobody could say his real name. I don't know. That was his nickname. I don't even know his real name. I might have to Google that again. But he was 13 years old when he passed away. So little is known about him. From what I could gather, he was a Roman painter. He was deaf, and he was believed to be either the nephew or the great nephew of Julius Caesar. Now, we wouldn't know anything about this because nobody was alive. We weren't even a nation. I don't even think we were discovered because it was before Christ. We wouldn't. So that was the reported first person ever who was deaf, which was a dude who was like 13. Um, I thought that was pretty cool. Um, Fast forward to the 16th century, and you go to the middle of Europe. And it's reported that the first people to actually acknowledge sign language were the monks. Yeah, you heard me. You know, the old dudes that practically invented the toga party. Yeah, those dudes, the ones that never talked, but all you hear is and all of that stuff. Yeah, them. It is noticeably the most famous monk was a dude that was a Spanish monk. You probably have heard of him, Pedro Ponce de Leon. He was deaf. He was born deaf. And in order for him to talk, which, as some of you know, being a monk, you and being in the temple or the monastery, their sacrificial, each monk's sacrificial sacrament was to give up their voice. They couldn't talk, or else they would interfere with God. So I guess they had to talk somehow, and being a deaf monk, he Ponce de Leon decided, hey, I'm going to make hand gestures. Given the fact that he was in a monastery and, you know, couldn't, was trying to get closer to God, I don't think that he was the one who started the gesture for the middle finger. Just saying, you know. I don't know. There's a lot of stupid people out there, so asking stupid questions. So, but anyway, we wouldn't have known anything about this because we weren't. This is the 16th century, so being in the monk community, they started their own version. Catholics, all of that good stuff. All of the monk people, can you imagine grown men in dresses, doing sign? I can't. It fast forward to the 17th century, and we go over to France, to a guy named Laurent Cleric. Now, back in the day, he is actually a famous person. He's a Nobel Peace Prize person, and he was the first guy. Laurent was actually a deaf tutor or a deaf instructor. He basically taught sign language in France, and eventually, remember his name because Laurent Cleric actually helped introduce sign language to America. Now, 17th century, now mind you, we just started as a nation in the 1700s. 1776, if I'm right. I'm going to shit myself because, yeah, not bad for almost a 40-year-old girl learning stuff. So, give or take a couple of years, in the 1700s, we were just forming as a nation. Laurent Cleric actually, being a professor that he was, discovering more words in sign language, wanted to broaden everybody's view. He actually was an advocate for the deaf community in his little French European area. Like I said, we as Americans would not know sign language until, or even hear about sign language until the 1800s. Now, mind you, like I said before, 1776, we were we were known as a nation. This is after that one dude, Columbus dude, who decided that he had seen America before everybody else. To this day, I still don't. He was a trickster all of himself. It was fucked. We were fucked from the beginning. Don't worry about it. So we had to get through all of that garbage. Of Columbus finding out where we were, blah, blah, blah. Whole debacle about that. And, since the colonies and all of that stuff. So, roughly around 1757, a guy named Thomas Gallaudet is born. He was born deaf. He actually went to school in Europe, who met his professor in Europe, Laurent Cleric, who is the world-renowned deaf instructor in Europe. Like I just said, he was true to his trade. He taught the deaf instructor taught Thomas all that he knew. Eventually, before his death in 1807, Thomas Gallaudet comes back to the United States, basically in his hometown of Hartford, Connecticut. Comes back home to Connecticut, moseys himself after he comes back from Europe. His family and his friends, or his family, packs up and goes to DC because, all of the good stuff that happened in, all the first timers, first of everything, had to go to Washington, D.C., because that was the only place hopping at 1700s, 1800s. And he started a school in the United States for the deaf culture called Gallaudet University. Now, at this point, it wasn't well known. It was more so for the elite and the privileged. Basically, if you had money, at first it was for the elite and all of that good stuff. And then, once he realized that nobody could afford it, he decided to do tuition and all of that stuff. So at this point, before his death in 1807, the school was actually pretty decent. It was pretty well established. He did pass away in 1807, or was it 05? I don't remember. It was 18 something. At this point, we still wouldn't know. I mean, we heard about it, but it is the 1800s, and it's no wonder, given the fact that we were in so many wars. It's no wonder that American Sign Language went into what we call the Dark Ages. Now, given the fact that Gallaudet was based in Washington, D.C., nobody would come out of it famously until Helen Keller. Now, Helen Keller actually was blind, deaf, and mute. And then every time that I say that, people are like, well, what about Beethoven? Beethoven was actually in Germany. Beethoven was the only one of the composers that was actually deaf. And then people stop me and say, well, Mozart was deaf too. No, technically he wasn't deaf nor blind. When Mozart was young, he contracted smallpox, which limited his eyesight, but not his brain or his hearing for listening to music. Eventually he got his hearing back, and both composers were like the best. Yeah, I know a lot of history about deafness. So it's the 1800s. Like, focus, Kit Kat, focus. Yes, I did have my coffee today, but I'm trying to get as much information in this video as possible because, yeah, I am a blonde and sometimes I forget. So it is the 1800s, and like I said, there was that period where we were in the dark. Everybody was in the dark about the sign language. It wasn't happening, and technically, given the state of our nation, bombs. We had to go through almost all of the wars: Cold War, Revolutionary War, both world wars. It was no contest. Nobody wanted to learn new things. It was all about power. like I said, we didn't know anything about sign language and about other languages until Helen Keller came about and her caretaker. Um, but the poor girl was doomed anyway. How she contracted all of them at once was when she was 18 months old, she got really sick, and on depending on where you look, on Google, it said either hay fever or an unknown illness. But given the between the 18th century and the 19th century, she was already screwed because there was cholera, there was malaria, um, anything with at the end was horrible. Polio and all of that stuff. So, but she revolutionized sign language, and being that of informal icon, more people were discovering what Thomas Gallaudet did and going to school. She eventually helped with the ADA Act, which, to tell you the truth, was ratified in 1991. The only reason why I remember that is because I was adopted at that time. It was like a couple of months after I got adopted, that the ADA Act was going on. And a lot of people who were deaf and who were hard of hearing, because sign language was that taboo, everybody had to like fake it until they made it, and or else get ridiculed and bullied. It wasn't until America actually caught on to sign language. Now, to tell you the truth, when sign language first started, it was completely different from American to the European. When Europeans across the pond, they would use the first sign language was actually written out as symbols. And since Americans are mostly dim-witted and or had as some European scholars said, some of the American people were like, well, it was illegible and not a lot of people could read the symbols from that time period. Bring those symbols over from Europe to America, and you have the likes of Helen Keller, making up signs, or what other people were making up signs. Now, usually, the origin of the signs varies from generation to generation. Like I said, the first few signs were actually written as symbols and eventually depicted by different areas of the world to do actual hand signals. I believe the actual hand signals goes back to when the monks did it. So, yeah. If you like this video, I have more useless information about sign language. But, yeah, I thought that it was really awesome to give you a tidbit. Man, I am such a nerdy person when it comes to sign language. All right. So, and before I leave, I just wanted to show you there's three little words that a lot of people forget. I gotta show you the word or the symbol for I love you. Like that. You have the I, you have the L, and you have the U. Sorry, momentary glitch in my head. So, I love you. But I will see you guys in the next video. Please comment below if you want to know more information or even a history lesson. Thank you for showing up.